Hi students, welcome to our week 10 highlights video. So let's jump right in. So for this week, you read 2 chapters from the Handbook of Usability Testing by Rubin and Chisnell, chapters 3 and 4. And now we're sort of circling back to some of the concepts that we were first introduced to in the first weeks of the class. So we're using another book, as you know, that is an overarching guide to usability testing. So now that you know a bit more, we can go back to some of these approaches delivered by other authors, and we can go into them more deeply, and hopefully you'll understand them even more deeply. So this chapter, chapter 3, describes 3 different tests, and these tests are typically used at different stages of the development cycle. They are exploratory tests or formative tests, assessment tests or summative tests, and validation tests or verification tests. So these tests are most useful during an iterative design process. I want you to know or look up now, pause the video and look up what an iterative design process is and how does that relate to the concept of a cycle. If you are familiar with anyone who works in technology today, you might have heard about iterative processes, and certainly we've learned about them earlier in the semester, but I would encourage you to pause the video and do a little bit of looking into what that means. And then think about how a testing scheme would fit into that iterative design process. So I would say, this is my phrase, it's a cliche, but when you are testing, when you are developing a testing schema, don't let perfect be the enemy of good. Don't think that just because you can't set up a perfect test with the absolute appropriate number of testers at just the right time, whether exploratory, assessment, or validation, that you shouldn't do it at all. That's letting perfect be the enemy of good. If all you can get to is good, that's better than nothing. One test at any time is better than none at all. So a quick question for you concerns verification tests. Are you looking for 100% of users meeting successful completion as a benchmark? Your authors have a really interesting comment on that at the end of this chapter, and I'd love you to take another look and see what they say. What is the percentage benchmark that they basically have come into an agreement on as effective? So let's take a look back at these 3 tests one by one. So for digital and hardware outputs, how do you test early versions? Well, an exploratory test can sometimes help in that arena. Is an exploratory test usually a very formal test? How might you prepare for one and run one? If you don't have a full build out of a product, or you just have a template, or as they say, if it's a material item, you just have sort of a foam model of it, how might you have someone test it? And would it be a very formal test when you were doing that? So a little bit further on in the development process, you might run an assessment test. Are these common? Please be sure that you can answer that question. So users in these tests perform tasks rather than just exploring a product. Quantitative information is collected. So what is quantitative information? What are examples of quantitative information? If you don't know the difference between qualitative and quantitative information, please pause the video and look that up, or write a note for yourself so you can go back and figure that out. When you are running your own test with your group in the second half of the semester, you're going to want to see how you generate quantitative data that indicates the usability of whatever it is that you're testing. So finally, validation tests. When are validation tests conducted in the general lifecycle process of design and release? How do you measure a product's performance against a benchmark, and what is a benchmark? So do these involve a moderator typically, or a think aloud protocol? Again, qualitative data is the central focus of a validation test. Again, the last thing I want to say about this from chapter 3 is that a comparison test can be used with any of these. Often a comparison test is when you are testing your current product against a prior version of it or against a competitor's product. In chapter 4, Rubin and Chisnell talk to you a lot about the skills that a moderator might need. Again, having a moderator of any kind is probably better than having no testing at all. You might not be able to find a perfect moderator. In fact, you might have to be the moderator, even if the product is of your own design. And that's better than nothing. If you can reach out to outside people, if your organization does not have an in-house testing staff, you might contact human factors specialists, and your book describes what those folks are. At our university, we have human factors specialists in some of our engineering disciplines, in fact. Marketing specialists, technical communicators, which is what we are. They give some real applause to some of the skills that technical communicators bring to UX teams in your chapter. You might reach out to other team members who you work with, or you might hire an external consultant if you can. So they describe some of the people you might reach out to in this chapter. In your usability test that you're doing with your classmate, the test moderator will be you folks. So you won't be bringing in an outside person to moderate the test. So you need to ask yourself, how can I exemplify as a moderator some of the most effective and important qualities that moderators should possess? These are outlined in the chapter, so please be sure that you're familiar with these, because these qualities are instrumental to having the test generate the kind of information that you need out of the test itself. I want you to think about, when you're starting to think about preparing for your own test, when would you use a sit-by protocol or a think-aloud protocol, and do these go together? Sit-by is just what it sounds like, somebody sitting by somebody else while they are testing something. So, and what are the benefits of just sort of sitting side by side or having someone talk through the process as they're using it? So you are gearing up to work with a collection of members of our class, a group. As I mentioned in week 1, if you're not comfortable with working with group mates in an online asynchronous class, this class isn't a good fit for you. We're really trying to replicate some of the practices that function in industry, so you're getting exposure to that, and you're going to have to work collaboratively, synchronously, sometimes, if you guys can work it out, and asynchronously through collaborative resources like Google Docs and slides. Many groups use text messaging or various other approaches to communicate with each other. So the group project, don't forget, starts in earnest next week with your first work with your group. In order to do that, you need to have let me know what your availability preferences are. So I circulated a Google Doc over a week ago, so please refer to that. I'll send you a link in a video as well this week, or a link in an email as well this week, and so be sure to fill it out. The assignment will be released in week 11. So in the highlights video for next week, I will go over some of the details for that assignment to add a little bit more dimension beyond what is in the assignment prompt document. On that note, thanks for watching this week's highlights video, and I will see you in next week's video.